Sid, he's not interviewing me. Please try and wake up. Do you want me to make you a cup of coffee?
Where's my scotch? Yeah, could you?
Yes, I'll make you a cup of coffee. But will you try and wake up, please? Because we gave him an interview and you want to give him a good interview. Alright? You're not talking intelligibly, you're falling asleep on your sunglasses. Wake the up.
Dear Dave, Agus Fortua Arrest, this is Jerome on the Roam in Hampstead, and I'm at the home of former music journalist, roadie and punk parking attendant, Mr. Alan Anger Butcher. Today we are going to be picking 5 punk classics because you were there, you knew all these guys.
I was always a rock fan. And like many of the musicians in the early 70s, went to see bands like The Faces. And also, I was a DJ for a while, so I used to play a lot of the rock stuff. There was a lot of rock pubs in the early 70s, in South London in particular. And when bands like the New York Dolls came out, it wasn't called punk or anything, it may be called garage bands. And of course, I like these bands, and I'd hear it, I'd go to watch an Alice Cooper concert, maybe hear them talk about New York Dolls. I want to know what they're all about, so I'll get the import over. So I heard a lot of this stuff, and I didn't know at the time, but a lot of the people involved in the punk thing in 76, 77 were doing the same thing, basically. Mick Jones of The Clash, Matt Dangerfield of The Boys, all these people, Brian James of The Damned, Glenn Matlock, the Sex Pistols, they were all doing the same thing. They were all buying these records, New York Dolls, Iggy and the Stooges. When Iggy came over and played King's Cross, everybody said they were there. Well, there weren't that many. Everybody who said they were there, obviously, it influenced a lot of people. When the Ramones album came out, that really was a killer. Everybody loved the Ramones album. And they're great bloke. I went on tour when the Boys supported the Ramones. It was a great tour. Curry every night because they don't get enough when they're back in New York. But the thing is, I'm going to just choose 5 songs from the British angle.
Was the New York Dolls probably the first time you felt this is different?
Probably. Yeah.
You know, so before the New York Dolls, would you say that the Who and the Kinks were getting near there?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The Kinks, you could say, started it all with You Really Got Me. Mm. And so many people, they say, oh, the Kinks, You Really Got Me, it started punk, it started heavy metal, it started so many things, it's untrue. And when you mentioned the Who, I was a kid, I was, I don't know. I was 10 years old or whatever, and my mum and dad took me to see the Who at Savile Theatre. Little bloke called Jimi Hendrix was supporting. And yeah, they were powerful. And a lot of it does come from them, as most of the Sex Pistols and a lot of others will mention. So yeah, the Who definitely, major influence.
The Sex Pistols, they're credited as the beginning of the explosion. Was it that way, or was there...
Because everybody probably knows the story now. Glenn Matlock was working in Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren's shop in Chelsea, and they got a lot of the fans coming in. A lot of these fans have been coming to that shop when it used to be called Let It Rock, and it was all rock and roll. And a lot of rockers, Teddy Boys and stuff, all went to the shop. And then you had this crazy fella, this crazy Hawkwind fan, calling himself Johnny Rotten. He was different from the rest of them. If it wasn't for him, I'd say Glenn, Steve and Paul would have been another mod band. Very much into the Who, Small Faces, Faces. Mick Jones of The Clash, he was in the Mutt the Hoople fan club, which was run by Chris Needs, who was the editor of Zigzag, which I ended up writing for. So a lot of the stuff, yeah, it was all one of the big kids off the street, if you like. All those bands that I've mentioned are like street bands, kids off the street, that kind of thing, especially in England. But no, nobody thought, oh, let's put a name on it, let's call it punk rock, or let's call it this, call it that.
Until somebody did think.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And I mean, I like the Nuggets albums, which were like Americans trying to be the Rolling Stones. Basically, they call them garage bands. So when it all comes back, and when the Clash sing We're a Garage Band, you know, it all comes together. And a lot of these people were in similar bands and came and went, you know, trying to get on. Chrissie Hynde tried to be in the Damned, she tried to be in the Clash. She was part and parcel of all this stuff that was going on. And I remember I'd been away with friends in Spain for a few months, came back and we said, what should we do? And we went, what's happening at the 100 Club? What's happening at the Hope and Anchor? So we go to the Hope and Anchor and there's a band called The Boys. I didn't know them, but they were playing their second ever gig. So I went there and I thought, this is good stuff. stuff, and I wrote that the keyboard player was unnecessary. And then one day I was at the marquee, and Casino Steel, the keyboard player, turned up, and he's wearing a badge. And he goes, "Are you Alan Anger? This is for you." And he flashed his badge, which said, "I am unnecessary." So I thought, this is good. I like this geezer. Have a drink.
But the Open Amper was sort of a bit of an early hub.
It was, and that's where the Damned played and recorded their first ever punk record, New Rose. They recorded the video in there because they actually played there regularly. I saw the Damned play there when Rat Scabies, the drummer, wrote on "Damned Unto Death." He wrote on the wall, which was there for ages. I don't know if it's still on the wall, but
if you knew what it was, you wouldn't want to scrub it off.
No, you wouldn't.
You know,
definitely not.
So, Alan, what would you pick at number 5?
I mentioned the Boys, so I better stick with them because I've got good friends with them. I've chosen Brickfield Nights by singer Matt Dangerfield. He wrote it and sung it. I could have chosen one of their hard and fast ones that they end the gig with, but no, I like Brickfield Nights. It's a fun song. And as I say, I ended up really liking the band, got to know the band well. Their manager at the time, Ken Muse, he'd worked with Andrew Oldham in the past.
Right.
With the Rolling Stones, and so we got to know each other. And where Matt actually lived in Maida Vale was in Warrington Avenue, was a place where a lot of the bands actually rehearsed in the early days. So a lot of the bands which became known as punk bands rehearsed there. And anyway, that's the first one I would choose, Brickfield Nights by the Boys. Number 4, I think we'll go for the old Xray Specs.
Little girls should be seen and not heard. Oh, bondage! Up you! 1, 2, 3, 4!
I used to hang around in the markets around Chelsea, around King's Road, and in one of the markets, one of the girls there was polystyrene, and she was such a character. And everyone knew her, and you always went to her store. She was always loud. As soon as you walked into that market, you could hear her. So everyone knew her and everything. Anyway, it was obvious she was going to become a singer in the band.
Yeah.
Especially around those days when everybody became a singer. I mean, I even became a singer. I made a record myself later on. But anyway, so polystyrene and Xray Specs, and like the Sex Pistols, Xray Specs always had the crowd, always had the Bromley contingent, or a lot of punks at the time went and followed them. So whether they were playing the Man in the Moon pub in King's Road or whether they were playing the Roxy, they always had the big crowd follow them. I mean, to be honest, some of the time...
Do you feel that was down to her charisma, polystyrene?
Yeah, mostly.
Or was there something about the music that was different?
Well, it was down to her. At the Rock Against Racism gig, where Xray Specs supported The Clash and Tom Robinson, I mean, she turned up with all her hair shaved off. I mean, she would do things like that. She would just turn up and be absolutely crazy, and was well worth watching all the time.
Yeah.
And I interviewed the band for Zigzag later on, and she was going through a lot of things. She'd seen UFOs or whatever, and all sorts of things were going on. And the record company were like, "Oh, not sure if you should talk to her." But it was funny.
A lot of these bands were great as a live
Absolutely.
performance. Yeah, a bit like the Slits.
Yeah,
The
I like the Slits too.
They don't really come across well on vinyl,
No,
do they?
not
But
that
you can
much.
see that
Yeah.
the charisma of Ari Up, and
I did like the Slits.
you know.
Saw them a few times. Yeah, they were good too. And Susie and the Banshees, of course. Saw them
Yeah,
a
well.
number of times. Yeah.
Well,
Susie.
they were a band that could
Yeah.
record an album.
Absolutely.
Too, you know.
So I saw Susie at Croydon pub called the Red Deer, and there was hardly anybody there, to be honest. It was just a pub, one or two old Irishmen having a drink in the bar. So she got up and she had all the lyrics of all her songs that had been written, and she just read them all out in the pub, and it was great. It was a great night. And later on, obviously, got more professional, as you say, good albums and everything. But Xray Specs, they stand out, and I think Polly still stands out for being on top of the pops and stuff like that. But this was so different, her going crazy, and of course the song "Oh Bondage Up Yours." I mean, it says it all. So yeah, that's the song that I choose then, number 4.
Female-fronted bands as well was kind of more... You had it, I suppose, in America with the Runaways.
Yeah.
It was the 70s you started getting these more female-fronted bands that you didn't
Yeah.
quite get as much. And punk was instantly accessible, wasn't it?
You have more women being involved with the bands, like Gay Advert playing in the adverts. She's just a member of the band, and that was different because you didn't get that too much before. I mean, in the 60s, a girl would be a drummer in the Honeycombs, and it's really, wow, that's so different.
Yeah.
And of course, this became a regular thing. It didn't matter who you were having in your band. Oh, can you play bass? Oh, you're in the band. nobody really cared if it was a boy or a girl. That was quite a new thing, really. So being part of the band, not just front ladies and stuff like that.
It's the first time you heard people talking about girls that aren't singing, Viv Albertine and
Tina Weymouth, yeah. I saw Talking Heads when they first came over and they played the Rock Garden, and there was no more than 10 people in there.
Yeah.
But you're right, that was the beginning of everything. And of course, Talking Heads become a bigger band later on and everything.
So, number 3.
In the early days, 76, 77, you go and see the bands. The Sex Pistols were known because of probably Malcolm McLaren putting the word about and everything. And there were other bands who weren't quite as punk, like Ultravox and that, who were about. But always the support band. It was always this bunch from Woking called The Jam. And yes, they looked like mods, and they did that on purpose because that was their rebellious look. Yes, they liked The Who just as much as all the other punk bands. But this time, they were going round, they were wearing the suits, they were saying, up yours, we don't have to go to Malcolm McLaren's shop, we do what we like, led by Paul Weller. And so I got to know them quite well, because all of us around the crowd at the time, you'd think, where should we go tonight, who's playing, you know, oh, is it The Damned, oh, they're not playing, or whatever. Oh, there's always The Jam playing a pub somewhere. You had a lot of little pubs in those days, which was really good. That was definitely a good part of the scene. You had the Red Cow in Hammersmith and Nashville, and you had all these other pubs to play. And you had the Jam playing, and a very exciting band. Played the odd Who song, as well as their own songs. And as the Jam developed, they got better and better. And that's why Paul Weller's probably the biggest out of all of that crowd to still be around. Yeah. And he's still looked up to by bands like Oasis and Blur and all that, because he took advantage of the whole thing. He always wanted it to be about his age group too. I remember when there was a big 2 nights at Wembley, and Jam had become big. The Jam were headline, and they had Slade and the Pirates on the bill. Paul Weller, no, I don't want this is no good. I want Glenn Matlock's band. I want band about my age. It meant a lot to him to do that.
Steve Marriott, he was really influenced by Steve Marriott.
Absolutely.
So because of that kind of visceral, energetic way of performing.
And it also helped when the Jam went on tour with The Clash, and Joe Strummer was a bit older than quite a few of the younger punks at the time as well. So Joe Strummer took Paul aside and said, let it all go, let your emotions come out. And it taught Paul Weller a lot, because after that, Paul Weller would do what he wanted. I mean, he'd read a bad review in Punk Fanzine Sniffing Glue, and I remember it. He'd be at the 100 Club and he'd set fire to it on stage. That was Paul Weller. He didn't give a monkey.
That's showmanship as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, at the time, that sort of thing just wasn't done. You know, you ignored it and got on with it, didn't you?
One of my favourite Jam songs is A-Bomb in Wardour Street, but I will go for In the City, because that was
such a good song.
Yeah.
And number 3, it's The Jam with In the City. Your second.
Yeah, we'll go for The Damned, because I always loved The Damned. They were anarchy more than any other band. That really was them. You didn't know what was going to happen.
Do you think The Damned showed the others how to have a good time?
I believe so.
You know, because, you know, you watch any footage of them, you listen to that first album, they're having a ball, aren't they? They're having a right old laugh.
Yeah, they're influenced by the Stooges, they're influenced by those bands. Yeah, they're being themselves, and they're totally crazy. I mean, the singer, Dave Vanian, he looks like a vampire. He lives like a vampire. I've been to a party where he disappeared up on the roof, and no one saw him again. So everyone... What? No, he's turned into a vampire. Of course he hadn't. He probably climbed down the drain pipe. But the fact is, he's
a proper rock star.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And Captain Sensible, we all know how crazy he is.
Yeah.
You know, he'd turn up in a ballerina's outfit one day at the Roundhouse, and then the next minute he'd come on for the encore with no clothes whatsoever. So, absolutely bananas. And you got Rat Scabies, probably the best drummer of the whole punk period. And
in the chaos
absolutely,
together.
Absolutely, yeah. So I love The Damned. So I'd have to go for the first ever punk record of that particular era, of course, was New Rose. Yeah.
And as you said, that's Hope and Anchor. It was shot inside there.
Absolutely. And you have people who used to go and see those bands. Of course, they formed their own bands later on. You have Shane McGowan later on, he ends up with the Pogues and stuff, and Shan ends up with the Nips with Shane singing. And a lot of these people used to just go and watch The Damned. I remember I'd seen them in the audience. We'd all be part of the audience. It's like Generation X, Billy Idol. He's still around, and in those
doesn't look any different.
No, he doesn't.
It's frightening.
He doesn't. Yeah. LA must have been good for him. But yeah, he's another one. He was in the band called Chelsea. just as a guitarist. And then everybody thought, you know what, he should be a frontman. So of course he left Chelsea with Tony James, who ended up in many bands, of course, right through to System of Mercy. And they ended up forming Generation X. So a lot of these bands just, it was a turnover, it was good, good time. So for number 2 will be The Damned, New Rose.
So here we've got to number 1.
Unfortunately, can't include everybody. There's no Clash songs, even though Your London Calling is probably the most famous. But I'm going to have to go for the Sex Pistols. I'm going to have to go for Pretty Vacant. Glenn Matlock wrote the song.
Mate of yours as well.
Yeah,
still.
absolutely. Yeah, I still talk to Glenn, still see him about. As I say, they were important. Maybe they would have just been another good rock band. All this crap about punks can't play was rubbish, because they are very good players. And Johnny Rotten came, of course, the front man, and made that difference.
I saw a documentary recently. Sid Vicious was the subject, where they were trying to say that he epitomised the punk scene. And I suppose he lived fast, died young.
Yeah, he did that.
You know, he did all that. But like, would they have been anywhere without John Lydon? And John Lydon's still the voice of punk.
That's the main thing.
You
He's
know.
the main man. I did know Sid. I knew him quite well. He's another one who lived around that Maida Vale area. Him and Nancy would come and visit Matt of the Boys, and they would both come over, so I knew both of them. There's a lot to Sid that people don't know. Sid would say things to me like, what's it like going bald? And he'd be looking in the mirror all the time. People don't ever mention that. He wanted that image.
Oh, so he wasn't casual about his look, you know, that this was
His
worked
friend
on.
Johnny Rotten was a big old friend from the past before any of this punk or music. And so he turned up. He got famous for various things, attacking Nick Kent of the NME and different things like this. And he got a big name as this tough guy. So I don't know how tough he was, because I was at the speakeasy one night when Paul Weller put a bottle over his head, and Sid said, "What'd you do that for?" And he said, "Just in case you do anything." And so I think Paul was the more one to watch out for. Sid was taken away to hospital. But yeah, Johnny was definitely the difference. The difference needed in a band, any band. It doesn't matter if it's punk or whatever. You know, you want that front man. You think, oh, who can we have as a front man? He might not be the best singer in the world.
But again, it's like we were talking about polystyrene earlier on. The guy's born to be on stage.
Same thing,
you know?
same thing.
And still pretty consistently doesn't suffer fools still, does he? You know, Public Image Limited.
Exactly, that's his band, that's his music.
Yeah, you couldn't have left out the Sex Pistols over the Clash.
Yeah.
And they were first as well, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, what the Clash was sort of a reaction to
they were. Yeah, the Clash. Mick Jones and people were looking for same sort of thing. They wanted a singer, they wanted someone.
So they got together first, didn't they? And then they approached Strummer.
That's right.
Because they thought
Strummer was in a pub band called the 101ers, and they were good. Good rock band, pub rock band. And yeah, he was good. He was good, and he was the difference for them. They needed him. But yeah, the Pistols were there before, so I'll go with that one. Sex Pistols, Pretty Vacant.
So there we are. Thank you very much. And that's it for this one. Jerome is Annandom. Slunga for.
Chick chick boom, chick 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 boom, chick chick boom, chick 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 boom.